now we have to try and break it down to five. Given you the challenge of getting your top five. So I want to see if we snap it all with any of these. And we are allowed to do some honourable mentions too. So my list says, Philip, that I get to go first. How's that?
Wow. Okay.
I've never seen that before. It's amazing.
No,
All
there you
right.
go.
So
That's Cambridge Heaven.
honourable mentions for me would have to be Blake Seven Tarrant, amazing set. Metamorphosis, which is the Fourth Doctor set, and particularly that one story in the middle called The Caged Assassin by Matthew Sweet. Operation Werewolf was amazing to hear that finally come to life, as was Goth Opera. Time War Reflections as well. Sirens of Time Redux just missed out on my top five. I would have put that in, but I had to be a bit brutal. And Unknown Soldiers from December. So they're my honourable mentions. But in my number five spot, I've got The Stuff of Legend live, and I didn't expect it to be in my top five at all. But because it was one of the last releases of the year, it just scraped in. But it was such a fun experience listening to it live. It's yeah, as I said, I would go this before I went the studio version. Although the studio version has different actors in it as well. So particularly Annette Badland. So I'd go for that to listen to her. Just hearing the audience participation, that's magical. Hearing Barnaby Edwards do the directing, he's such a showman. The jokes were fantastic. And as I said, the only issue was that we didn't get a video release. So hopefully down the track that might happen. For my number four spot, you might be surprised at this, but I've put Echoes Through Eternity, the Gallifrey Short Trips anniversary special, which is 20 years of Gallifrey, isn't it? So it was Big Finish is doing lots of anniversary specials, has done lots of them over the last few years, and you can almost go under the radar, this one. That was such a good few months. It's easy to miss, but I think this perfectly and so lovingly covers the entire history of Gallifrey from the first series way back with Gary Russell right through to Heather. And I think it does that so amazingly simply in those short stories. It was great hearing Sean Carlson and Sophie Aldred, but Miles Richardson coming back as Braxitel was just the icing on the cake for me. So I think that is a must-have for all fans of the Gallifrey series, and it's also a perfect example of why I love the short trips range so much. In my number three spot, I've got Echoes, which is the Eighth Doctor Liv and Helen, which I said previously that they're not encumbered by this massive epic series that has an arc going all the way through. The standout for that for me was Birdsong by Tim Foley. What an amazing piece. It was so simply done, it's so haunting. And I also like that final story by Dan Rebelato as well. Ambitious storytelling, and I'm looking forward to hearing some more. Benji Clifford, we haven't mentioned him so far in the show yet, but he's great in the Eighth Doctor range on his sound design. Always love him. And we've already mentioned Sean Longmore as well. Does another great cover for this, and love his cover art. He's probably my favourite cover artist at Big Finish at the moment. Into my number two, the Quintessence. These guys they just continue to impress. They've got this episode by newcomers to the range, Stuart Pringle and Lauren Mooney. What an interesting couple to get to write this story. Because I personally, I've always preferred the Daleks over the Cybermen, and when it's classic Cybermen, particularly black and white or even Mondasian, even more so. So this story is kind of split into two. You've got you've got the Seeds of Doom style two parts, opening it up, which is in a different setting to the rest of the story. You've got an incredible part that's virtually a one-hander with Katie Manning in the middle of that story, which is absolutely incredible. She manages to tug on my heartstrings every time. So yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing, really. Taking the body horror and the Cybermen in this new direction is very interesting as well. I was captivated by this. So that's my number two. But my number one was, it got me early in the year and it stayed there all year, and that's Fugitive of the Daleks. It was never quite topped again. Stevens shines, I think, as the first Doctor, and this story's got a really interesting twist. Even though I I guessed it before the reveal. I think it was played out to to perfection. Stephen, he's my favourite of the first three Doctor recasts. I know he puts heaps of work and he's pretty dedicated to the role, but I think he does play the first Doctor like it's a musical instrument. He's got the cadence, the intonation, the fluffs. I think this is as close as we're ever going to get to the character of the first Doctor coming fully to life. And Maureen O'Brien in that story as well. She plays that with such sincerity as an older woman. She had me in tears in certain places. And I've got to do a big shout out too to Jonathan Morris, who we often call him reliable, but I think he's much more than reliable. He's got like a consistent reliability that makes him, I think it makes him one of the best writers on the Big Finish roster. So, he was, weaving character and story throughout that was like, it was like a masterpiece of that first Doctor era. And, particularly of that story that The Fugitive of the Daleks was based on. I'm a huge fan of that. So Johnny Morris has done a great job at that. So there's my number one, Fugitive of the Daleks, boys.
Okay, I'll jump in with Kenny till last. Honourable mentions, Tarrant. I thought that was just loved having it there. The Torchwood tube strike has an honourable mention. I think that's the one that scared me the most. I also had the Quinn dilemma. I thought what they did with Colin Baker and all these different time periods was just so funny and cleverly done. And having four Colin Bakers at the end, 4 Sixth Doctors, all dealing with each other, fighting with each other, working with each other was just great. And I've got the Sultans versus the Rushons Born to Die in there as an honourable mention as well. These are my top 5 that I came up with a few hours ago. I don't know whether I'd change them all now, having just talked through all these with you guys. But anyhow, this is what I had before we started the program, and it will keep shifting because it just does. But number 5, I had Storm of the Sea Devils. I love Tom Baker, love the Fourth Doctor. I think they did the Sea Devils in such a clever way. They just allowed the characterization of the Sea Devils, their motivation, their humanist is the wrong word. Their Sea Devils, they weren't just shallow monsters. They had depth to them. They had character to them. They had a real understanding of what they were on about. And Naomi and Harry worked so well together. That spice, just that opening scene in the airport, and it was like a James Bond for the first episode, and it kept getting more complex. But the setting, the oligarch billionaire, they're typical at the moment. It just really spoke to me. So that was my number 5. For number 4, I had goth opera. Just once again, I think this is what Dwayne said earlier. Usually the books are very hard to set up and make work as a story. They did give us an extra 2 episodes, which I think helped a lot because it became 6 parts, I'm pretty sure. It was certainly an extra disc, and that allowed for a lot more story to happen. Really well handled. I've got the book. I'm not sure I've ever read the book, but this just worked brilliantly as a Doctor Who story. So goth opera, lot of deep and adult themes there. My number 3, Fugitive of the Daleks. Maureen O'Brien was just wonderful to have back, and once again doing allowing the characters to get older, like they did with Jo Jones later. It just allows you to go further. There was so much humor in this. There was so much pathos in this. Stephen Noonan, even though he won't come on our podcast, was just wonderful. And just really loved his performance. I would really love to talk to him about how he prepares and does all that. And he knows that. And I'm still waiting for him to come. Stephen Noonan, just come on our podcast for goodness sake and stop farting around. Wonderful story. And I've already got into the Peter Purves one this year and loving that as well. So we need more First Doctor. I think it was only this and the 3 Doctors story, which wasn't the 3 Doctors. Missing the First Doctor. I think it's a great range. Number 2, Sontarans versus the Rutons, the Giant's Causeway. So this was the one that kicked it all off. Just having Charlie and Kara's back, it was just like a warm pair of comfy slippers that went on. And they used Perez in a really clever way. He was a proper character. They had a real reason to use him in terms of the Rutons, part of the integrity of the whole plot. The soundscape was amazing. The pace at which it moved was just wonderful. Um, and it kicked off the whole four. I mean, as everything in the box set, this would have been my number one, the whole box set. So I also gave honorable mention to the Sixth Doctor story with Charlie as well. But all four stories were great. And for number one, I have Operation Werewolf. It really surprised me. I wasn't expecting it to be Operation Werewolf. It's unusual. I'm not usually impressed by the Lost stories. This had all the charm of the 60s stories. It felt a bit like the Avengers. You had the fact you had this bizarre technology created in the 40s, which shouldn't exist. That was very Avengers to me. I loved the fact you had all the different accents that people were about to do. It was epic. You had all France invade. You had England happening. You had complex characters, some moustache twirling villains, which were over the top, but were still funny because of it. It just had bits of everything. And Wendy Padbury, Fraser Hines, and Michael Troughton, the three of them just gave superb performances. They lifted the rest of the cast up. I guess partly too, I mean, I talked to Fraser a lot about this while he was out here, and he has some very funny stories to tell about some of the cast, which I won't repeat, but everything in this just worked for me, and I love the wars. My thesis I did when I did my master's was on war in children's literature, and this is the sort of piece that would have fitted really well with when I did my thesis. So everything about this I just enjoyed. So yeah, my number one, Operation Werewolf. So my top five. Kenny.
And just say this is so like listening to an episode of the Doctor Who show with the list makers, but it's a pleasure to be involved in chatting to a couple of my favourite Aussies. So my just bubbling under that just missed out are from the Torchwood monthly range, Missing Molly and Bad Connection, Torchwood Soho Ascension, Queen Dilemma and Trials of a Time Lord, War Doctor Morbius, Sirens of Time Redux, Tarrant, and Operation Werewolf have not made my top five. In at number five, it is one that I just mentioned. From the end of the year, Deadly Strangers. Here we have the Eighth Doctor and Charlie reunited and just back to their glorious best, as given that you think that when Big Finish began, they were doing stories with Doctors and Companions that had only been on air in some cases just over a decade beforehand. But now we're actually doing stories with Big Finish companions from 22, 23 years ago, and they're able to create their own nostalgic arc in there. So it's wonderful to be able to go back and revisit it. And then you've got Audacity added into the mix as well, which is just wonderful. And when you listen to India Fisher being possessed by the Mara, it's just like, that voice. Oh, I will obey. And in at number four, we have Goth Opera. So it's a snap with you, Philip. I absolutely love the novels, and I've been rereading quite a few of the Missing Adventures of late. In fact, there's one for the YouTube viewers to be able to see, and I'm holding up a copy of Killing Ground by Steve Lyons, which has got the Sixth Doctor and Cybermen, and Alistair Pearson, the artist. Sorry, Grant Markham as the companion on the cover. So I've been enjoying those. So Goth Opera was a real pleasure to reread the book and then go and do the audio. So that is fantastic for me. And number three, I've cheated a little because it is one story, but it's a story over 4 discs in 8 parts. It's The Eternity Club, as we go back to Bernice Summerfield. And here we've got her with her new friends. We've got Draconian, we've got Sontaran, we've got a Dravin, a Tree, and many others. And it's just wonderful. There's so much humour in there while Benny gets on to explore and just shows just why she's the original and the best in terms of wonderful archaeologists in the Doctor's life. Absolutely love her. And Lisa is obviously an emotional one for her coming back to play Benny, as you touched on earlier, given that she lost her partner in real life in David Warner and her doctor as well. So it's a wonderful series. It builds up to a fantastic climax with who is the oldest member? And yeah, just what happens at the end of episode 8 is just, and I cannot wait for that to be resolved. So stay tuned for later this year. And at number 2, I've got another snap, and it's with you, Philip, again, with Sontarans versus Rutans, Giants, Causeway. I've always been a big fan of Kera's, and I thought that back in the day, he didn't always get the best sort of material that he perhaps could have, and indeed should have. And because you've got Lizzie Hopley, somebody who knows Conrad, and indeed somebody who acted alongside him when they did Terra Firma, And she played, of course, the Doctor's companion, who we've all forgotten, and she was just wonderful. I just think it's a wonderful script. Lots going on, brilliant ideas about the imagery of Rutans embedding themselves into the Giant's Causeway itself in terms of their breeding process. So brilliant, such a good release, and it does build up nicely. And again, it's that lovely nostalgic feeling of the Doctor and Charlie, but with Kera's this time. So I really would hope there'd be more. And I mean, who knows? Rutans versus Centaureans, anyone? I'll go for a rematch further down the line, please. Stay tuned. We shall see. I hope Mr. Dorney is listening. And then at number one for me, it's the Stuff of Legend Live. It was a fantastic weekend. I love being away. I got to spend time with Paul, got to catch up with him, seeing India, who we've been pals for 23, 24 years. Our birthdays are just a few months apart. And Alex McQueen was wonderful as well. He's a month older, so it was sort of like the three of us had all turned 50 last year. So we had a good laugh at that, and just wonderful company. And I think it is probably more of the whole experience. And it just was a great couple of days, getting to spend time with the likes of Barnaby, Edwards, who I've never really had the chance to spend much time with socially. It's always been sort of like worky stuff. So it was great to see him in that context, and just a wonderful cast, a room full of people just so full of love and enthusiasm and warmth, and just completely adoring what they were doing. And I was only down to observe, really, and get a few sort of interviews, but ended up having to actually do interviews for the video material that was released to accompany it, which was great. I was asked to go out and sort of, Kenny, you know Alex quite well, don't you? He's like, yeah, okay, you can do an interview with him. So you get and just when he gets through the hello, you, and just wonderful. He's superb. In fact, I actually sent him a box of Scottish goodies, and he sent me a lovely little message the other day. I don't know what he thinks of haggis, though. His dad's Scottish. Another half Scottish on his father's side. So, yeah. But for me, Stuff of Legend Live, brilliant. I've got the program signed there. I've even got the poster of it. I bought a frame for it. I don't normally buy posters and get them framed, but it's on my wall above my monitor here, and it just looks wonderful. So Saturday, the 14th of September 2024 is a day that will forever be etched into my heart as a wonderful time, and got to meet lovely people, and it was just a blast.
G'day audiophiles. If you enjoyed that clip from the Science of Audio podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button, click that notification bell so you never miss another upload from us, and hey, if you really liked it, click the like button too and drop us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Fair dinkum.